The moment the moving truck rolled up to our driveway, Margaret Sterling practically started foaming at the mouth. I mean that figuratively, of course. But by noon, she was working herself into such a frenzy that literal foam wouldn't have shocked me in the slightest. Within just 6 hours of our arrival in Cedar Creek Crossing, she had already managed to print and deliver 3 bogus eviction notices from her home computer. Call animal control to report a so-called rogue emotional support cat terrorizing the neighborhood, and even attempt a citizen's arrest on my wife, Claire, for the unforgivable sin of having an unapproved mailbox color. Then she made her biggest mistake. At exactly 3:47 p.m., there came a thunderous pounding at our front door. Through the frosted glass, I could make out Margaret's face, red, pinched, and vibrating with self-righteous fury. Flanking her like bodyguards were 2 other HOA board members. Her voice bellowed so loud it echoed across the cul-de-sac. "You have 48 hours to vacate this property, or I'll have you forcibly removed by whatever means necessary." I opened the door slowly, calm, and collected. Then I reached into my back pocket and pulled out my badge. The gold detective's shield caught the afternoon light just right as I held it up at eye level. "Ma'am," I said evenly, "you just threatened a peace officer and my pregnant wife with illegal eviction and implied violence. Guess who's about to be forcibly removed now? My name is Detective Julian Vance, recently transferred to the supposedly peaceful suburbs of Cedar Creek Crossing after 7 years working narcotics in Houston. This move was supposed to be a fresh start. Claire dreamed of growing herbs, planting lemon trees, and enjoying quiet Sunday mornings. On a wraparound porch, after years of stakeouts, wiretaps, and dangerous undercover ops, I was ready for that same peace. We'd found our dream home. A cozy 3-bedroom fixer-upper on Willow Branch Court. The bones were solid. The neighborhood looked quiet, and we couldn't wait to rip down the atrocious 1980s wallpaper and make it our own. What I didn't realize was that in all my years dealing with drug dealers, gang members, and hardened criminals, I'd never met anyone as ruthless or as delusional as Margaret Sterling. She was 5 foot 2 inches of pure, concentrated spite. Always in capri pants, stuffed with what I swear were tactical pockets. She carried her HOA president title like a medieval queen swinging a royal decree. She'd once tried to ban outdoor laughter after 8 p.m. because it violated the sanctity of evening quiet hours. Wind chimes, forbidden. Garden gnomes, outlawed. And every mailbox had to be painted the exact same shade of regulation beige. The trouble started small, like it always does with people like Margaret. The morning after we moved in, a neatly folded warning notice was tucked under our windshield wiper. Our crime: an unpainted fence slat on the side of the house. Never mind that we'd owned the place for less than 24 hours. The next day, another letter appeared. This time, a formal citation accusing us of displaying aggressively modernist patio furniture that clashed with the established aesthetic standards of Cedar Creek Crossing. It would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. During our first weekend barbecue, a drone appeared over our backyard, hovering low enough to be obvious but high enough to pretend innocence. It circled 3 times, camera fixed squarely on our grill like it was collecting evidence. For a federal case, when I waved at it sarcastically, it zipped away, straight toward Margaret's house 3 doors down. By Monday, we'd been reported to the city for operating an unauthorized business from a residential property. That business turned out to be my garage gym, where I trained alone at 5 a.m. before work. The poor city inspector who came out looked embarrassed to even be there. I showed him my badge, explained the situation, and he closed the case immediately. Before leaving, he let slip that the anonymous complainant had called 6 separate times demanding urgent enforcement action. Claire, sweet, patient Claire, still tried to keep the peace. She baked a batch of her grandmother's empanadas and brought them to Margaret's house, hoping to smooth things over. Margaret cracked open the door, looked down at the plate like it was a biological hazard, and said, "Ethnic." Foods are not welcome in Cedar Creek Crossing. They might attract undesirable elements. The way she said undesirable told me everything I needed to know about her brand of hate. Then came the porch cactus incident. The moment I realized we were dealing with something far beyond normal HOA pettiness. Claire had set a small, cheerful cactus in a hand-painted pot by our front door. It was maybe 6 inches tall, completely harmless. Within hours, a formal HOA memo landed in our mailbox, printed on official letterhead. It declared the cactus to be menacing vegetation, posing a clear and present danger to neighborhood children. The letter demanded its immediate removal and threatened daily fines of $100 for non-compliance. That's when I knew it was time to go on the offensive. To ward 2 decades in law enforcement, teach you one vital lesson: document everything. I installed security cameras around the property, legal, visible, and always recording. I kept every notice, every letter, every ridiculous photo that appeared mysteriously in our mailbox. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I already knew I'd need all of it one day. That day came sooner than I thought. It was a Thursday morning when I found an eviction notice taped to our front door with enough Scotch tape to gift wrap an entire platoon's worth of Christmas presents. Printed in Comic Sans, which somehow made it even more insulting and accused us of violating 17 HOA bylaws. The document ordered us to vacate within 7 days and was signed. Margaret Sterling, President, CEO, and Supreme Authority of Cedar Creek Crossing HOA. I brought it to my captain that afternoon. Partly for legal advice, mostly because I knew he'd get a laugh out of it. He laughed so hard, tears filled his eyes, but then he grew serious. "Julian," he said, "people like that, they escalate when they feel cornered. Be careful." I should have listened more closely, because the following week, Margaret filed an official county complaint, claiming Claire and I were illegal squatters who had broken into the home and were refusing to vacate. She even forged property documents to suggest she personally owned our house through some imaginary HOA clause. And the piece de resistance, a grainy, obviously photoshopped photo showing me pointing a weapon at concerned neighbors. The so-called weapon was clearly my leaf blower, with a fake pistol grip clumsily edited on. But Margaret's masterpiece came that Friday afternoon. She assembled what she proudly called the Community Removal Committee: herself, Arthur Brooks, and Patricia Higgins. Arthur was a retired accountant who perpetually looked confused about where he was. Patricia, on the other hand, was Margaret's right-hand enforcer, the same woman who once measured grass height with a ruler during a thunderstorm. And that was the moment I realized this neighborhood war was only just beginning. They rolled up to my house in a golf cart, decked out with HOA flags fluttering, like it was some kind of deranged parade float. Margaret had even crafted a homemade badge bedazzled with glued-on rhinestones that proudly read HOA Enforcement Division. I'll give her credit. The woman committed her delusions. With Arthur and Patricia in tow, she marched right up to my front door, pounding on it with surprising force for someone her size. Her voice, sharp and commanding, echoed across the cul-de-sac. Under the authority vested in me by the Cedar Creek Crossing Homeowners Association, I hereby order you to vacate these premises within 48 hours. Windows cracked open, curtains shifted. Faces appeared at every window on the block. Failure to comply, she continued, will result in forcible removal by any means necessary. I have the full weight of the HOA behind me. What Margaret didn't realize was that I had taken the day off from field duty, but was still working, reviewing case files for an active investigation. My body cam was running, my phone was recording, and I just finished texting my lieutenant about another case. In other words, I was legally functioning as a police officer when she decided to threaten me and my pregnant wife. I opened the door slowly, locking eyes with her as the smug confidence drained from her face. Behind her, Arthur fumbled with his phone, clearly trying to film their victory, while Patricia gripped her clipboard like a shield. I reached into my back pocket with deliberate calm, pulled out my detective's badge, and held it up so all three could see. "Ma'am," I said, in my official tone, the one I reserve for arrests and courtroom testimony. "I'm Detective Julian Vance with the Cedar Creek Crossing Police Department. You've just committed several crimes, including impersonating a government official, making terroristic threats, and attempting to illegally evict lawful residents. You have the right to remain silent." Margaret's jaw dropped. Her mouth opened and closed like a goldfish gasping for air. "That's not..." "You can't," she stammered. "I am the authority here," she suddenly shouted, stamping her foot like a furious toddler. "This is my neighborhood. I decide who lives here." I continued reading her rights calmly while pulling my phone with my free hand. "Sheriff's Office. This is Detective Vance. I've got a situation at my residence involving threats and attempted illegal eviction. I'll need units for transport." Arthur dropped his phone with a clatter. Patricia's clipboard slipped from her fingers, papers fluttering across my lawn like confetti. They both stepped backward, the color draining from their faces as reality began to set in. Margaret, however, wasn't ready to surrender. "You can't arrest me," she screamed, flecks of spit flying. "I'm the HOA president. I have immunity. This is my jurisdiction." Then she actually tried to push past me into the house, adding attempted breaking and entering to her already impressive list of charges. Within 10 minutes, 2 sheriff's deputies arrived, lights flashing, sirens off. They wanted to keep the scene calm, but by that point, every neighbor on the street was watching. Phones were out. This was already a full-blown suburban spectacle. I handed Deputy Jenkins, a seasoned officer I'd worked with before, a flash drive I'd prepared ahead of time. On it were screenshots of Margaret's fake documents, threatening emails, surveillance clips of her drone hovering over our backyard, and recordings of prior confrontations. Jenkins reviewed the evidence on his patrol car's laptop, his eyebrows steadily climbing higher. "She claimed she owned your house," he asked, disbelief thick in his voice, "and filed official reports with the county." "This is extensive." That's when Margaret made her final, glorious mistake. As Deputy Jenkins approached with handcuffs, she bolted. Or more accurately, waddled briskly to her golf cart and floored it. The thing maxed out at maybe 12 miles per hour, but she drove it like she was in a high-speed chase. She made it about 30 feet before attempting a dramatic turn onto the sidewalk. The cart tipped, wheels lifted, and she went tumbling out in a flurry of capri pants and rhinestones, landing face first in her prized hedge, the same hedge she'd once fined a neighbor for trimming. Unevenly, the arrest after that was almost anticlimactic. Deputy Jenkins read her rights as she sat on the curb, leaves tangled in her hair, while the other deputy documented the scene. Arthur and Patricia were questioned, then released. It was clear they were followers, not co-conspirators. Still, they'd face their own fallout later. By evening, every second of the incident had been uploaded online from multiple angles. Local news picked it up almost immediately. The headline flashed across the screen that night: HOA president arrested for fake eviction scheme. The photo they chose showed Margaret being helped out of the hedge, face red and eyes wide, her rhinestone badge hanging crooked. The segment even mentioned Claire's menacing cactus, cutting to a close-up of the tiny plant with its red flower. The reporter could barely keep from laughing. The internet, of course, had a field day. Someone looped the audio of Margaret screaming, "I am the law," and set it to a dance remix. The golf cart chase and hedge dive went viral on TikTok, racking up millions of views within days. Memes flooded social media. One showed her rhinestone badge overlaid with Comic Sans text reading, "Authority denied." Another featured a cartoon cactus wearing sunglasses with the caption, "Menacing vegetation since 2024. Then came the legal consequences. The district attorney's office, smelling both an easy win and great PR, threw the book at her. Impersonating a government official, filing false reports, making terroristic threats, attempted breaking and entering. harassment, and misuse of emergency services. Each carried real jail time and hefty fines. At her arraignment, Margaret insisted on representing herself. It went exactly how you'd expect. She declared that the judge had no authority within Cedar Creek Crossing and claimed sovereign HOA immunity. Judge Harrison, a no-sense woman who'd seen it all, wasn't impressed. She held Margaret in contempt after her 6th interruption and appointed a public defender on the spot. Meanwhile, the HOA board scrambled. They called an emergency meeting the next day. Without Margaret there to intimidate them, residents finally spoke freely. Story after story poured out: harassment, discrimination, pure abuse of power. A retired teacher from Elm Street revealed how Margaret had fined her for hanging a pride flag in June. A young couple admitted she'd measured their baby stroller to ensure it complied with community standards. The vote to remove Margaret from the board was unanimous. The vote to dissolve the HOA entirely, near unanimous. Only 2 dissenting votes, both from her last remaining loyalists. They were swiftly ostracized by the community. In place of the HOA, residents set up a neighborhood suggestions box. It mostly collected recipes, lost pet notices, and photos of cats. It was perfect. Claire's little cactus became something of a community mascot. Neighbors started leaving tiny trinkets around it: decorative stones, miniature sombreros, toy badges. Someone even made a wooden sign that read, "Cedar Creek Crossing Official Menacing Vegetation, EST 2024. We kept every piece of it, a small shrine to the absurdity we'd survived. 3 months later, Margaret's case ended in a plea deal. She avoided jail, but got 2 years of probation, 300 hours of community service. Ironically, helping low-income families with housing issues and fines totaling $47,000. She was also banned from holding any administrative, governmental, or quasi-governmental position in the entire county for 10 years. The judge specifically included HOA boards, PTAs, and even neighborhood watch groups. Then came the civil suits. Turns out Margaret's victims had been keeping records too. A veteran she'd fined for flying a flag 2 inches too large. A single mother had reported 2 child services because her kids drew chalk art on their own driveway. An Indian family she'd tried to stop from celebrating Diwali. Each one had documentation, and each one won. By the time the dust settled, Margaret had lost her house to pay, legal fees and settlements. The once grand colonial she'd ruled from, like a tyrant, was auctioned off. In a stroke of poetic justice, it was bought by a mixed-race couple with 3 kids, 2 dogs, and a love for colorful yard art. They painted the front door purple and installed a 6-foot-tall garden gnome named Arthur. And as for Margaret, when the judge read out her $47,000 fine and the 10-year ban from any position of authority, she stood motionless, face cycling through disbelief, rage, and finally a hollow understanding. She opened her mouth to protest, but no words came out. Her knuckles whitened on the defendant's table. She swayed slightly, whispered just loud enough for the court reporter to catch. But I was the president. The gavel came down with a sharp, echoing crack, ending the reign of Cedar Creek Crossing's most infamous ruler once and for all. Subscribe to HOA Conflicts for more.